Hi, friend. Today we're going to be talking with Bryan Cohen, and I'm super excited about this conversation that we had. So let's hop into the interview. So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your classes, and your books? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but if you would like to share a little bit about yourself, that'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. So I originally started working in the self-publishing world a bit in about 2013 and was doing multi-author Facebook events, if you can
Wow.
remember back to that hallowed age. And basically, I just loved connecting with other authors there. And so that led to eventually a connection with Jim Kukral, where I started doing the Sell More Book Show podcast with him back in 2014. And that
I loved that.
still runs. Thank you. It still runs today, now with Claire Taylor. And we just had our 400th episode.
Wow.
So 400 consecutive weeks of
That's awesome.
indie author news. And then when I had the podcast going, came up with the idea with the help of a former self-publishing podcast guy, Simon Whistler from the
Okay.
Rocking Self-Publishing Podcast. He helped me come up with the idea for a author copywriting service, and that was he wanted it to be called Dr. Descriptio, but we ended up going with Best Page Forward,
Oh, yeah.
and that is my copywriting agency. We've written over 4,000 book descriptions, and we've even moved into covers and metadata, which is exciting. And
That is.
so that is that service. And then uh 2019, we're really starting to see authors have trouble telling even if their book descriptions were working or not.
Okay.
And so we started moving more into the Amazon ads, trying to figure out, well, how can we easily tell authors how well they're doing, how well their books are converting, and if they're profiting. And so we started learning more about ads ourselves, started teaching it later that year, and that is now known as Amazon Ad School. And we have over 1,500 students in there, and we've learned a lot about how to get people profitable. We just had our 10th student who reached over $10,000 a month in royalties.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah, we're really
Oh,
excited. And of course, we find out someone's like on the cusp, and so now we have almost 11. And
wow. Oh,
so
my God.
it's we're really proud of all the stuff we do, and it all kind of connects.
Oh, wonderful. That is just wonderful. I'm so excited for you guys. That and to be
Well,
doing
thank
that,
you.
what you love for a living, that's just awesome. So,
Agreed. Agreed.
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so and I always ask this question, anyone that I interview, what are your five favorite books of all time?
Hmm.
If you could pick five.
So one of my favorite fiction books is The Princess Bride, the book. I love the movie, but the book is actually, I think, a little bit better. And that's tough because I love me some Princess Bride, the movie, but the book is so good and makes me wish there were 20 sequels, but I think there was only like a primer for a sequel that I'm not even sure ever happened.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it is just one of my favorite reads. I I love nonfiction. You'll see my back here is littered with nonfiction, so I'll point to a couple. We've
Yeah.
got The One Thing,
Okay.
which is such a great title for people who are trying to do too much all at the same time,
Yep.
trying to pretend that multitasking exists when it really doesn't. It just doesn't work. And
Yep.
so I would say that pretty much every author needs to read that book.
Okay.
Um, I would say another one of my favorites back here is Atomic Habits,
Yes.
which is so good. And essentially, the 1 second summary is figuring out how to not just have a habit, but to be a person who does that habit. And the small differences between those two things can make a big difference.
Oh, totally.
So number 4 is kind of an interesting one. And so I'm gonna go with 50 Success Classics.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those books that summarizes other books. And so it's kind of like, is this just gonna be a waste? But honestly, this was one of the books that I think kind of in getting my mindset right helped me to start thinking bigger, helped me to grow as an author entrepreneur. And now I read or listen to that whole series of books.
Okay.
And so the last thing I'll do, and this is more for me than necessarily other people, but I think it could still be helpful to an author. And that is a book called Small Giants.
Okay.
Which is a book about big companies that had the opportunity to get big, but instead of selling to the top bidder, they decided that they were going to do it on their own and find a way to become great rather than just make a whole lot of money. And that's kind of been something I've been using and my team has been using to make sure that we are focused on what we actually want to be as a company.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds awesome. All those books sound great. Like I've read Atomic Habits and The Princess Bride, and I love those, but I'll have to read the other ones too. That I love getting new book recommendations. So that's great.
Okay.
As you can tell, I don't have enough.
I know there's a little bit of space. You move the dolls, you put you'll get some more books.
Exactly. So what originally made you want to be a writer and also help writers? Because I know you do both.
Right. So I think that one of the things that I just always loved the idea of thinking about things in a different way from other people. I loved back in college writing very different stories than other members of my class had. I loved the idea of just having fun spins on things. I remember sharing these books with folks, sharing these stories with folks, and really just getting that like, oh, that's really weird kind of reaction and kind of enjoying that. And so I like doing that with stories. And then I also wrote plays as well back in college. And then out of school, I really started falling in love with kind of the nonfiction writing side of things and blogging, and really loved the idea of helping other writers who struggled with the same things that I was struggling with. And in the beginning, that was mostly like motivation advice and that was creativity advice, but it kind of morphed over time into marketing advice, because there are plenty of people giving motivational advice, but there at the time were not so many people who could actually help people sell that thing. And something I've really fallen in love with is the idea of when you try to help somebody with their marketing, can you say it in such a way that it's applicable to everybody, not just people making a certain amount of money, that everyone could understand? One of my favorite compliments I've ever gotten is Mark Dawson's wife and Joanna Penn's husband both enjoyed the way that I taught things. Author partner of these big time author teachers say, oh, I really like Bryan's stuff, was it just hopefully showed that the thing I'm going for of making sure everybody can get it actually is happening.
Oh, cool. That is really cool. Yeah. And to have those author partners be able to see that like what you're doing and what you teach works, because even like, I'm sure they've, implemented those things in their lives and they're so successful. I see you write fiction too. So can you tell me a little bit about that and what's kind of inspired you with that? a little bit?
Absolutely.
I know you've
So,
moved more into the nonfiction, but
oh, right. No, I miss writing fiction because it's been a little bit of time, but I I was inspired by the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer
okay.
to come up with a character what if Buffy and Giles were the same character? So
Okay.
wise beyond their years, but also like teenage girl and all of the assumptions people would make about her from the outside. And so that was the character that kind of formed the beginning of that series, which I
Cool.
published first in 2014, but then relaunched in about 2017 with kind of a new written first book and new covers and everything. And that's the Viral Superhero series. And it's a 7-book series.
Cool.
And I really enjoyed writing that. I think that it was awesome to be able to do that, because now when I teach, I'm not just a person who's done nonfiction, I've done fiction. And so I absolutely understand where folks are coming from,
Mhm.
and knowing that those creative droughts do occur, and knowing that you can't just sit in the chair and magic things happen every day, and trying
Right.
to balance that with marketing at the same time is extremely challenging.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's really good that you put it that way too. And so like with your fiction, are you planning to come up with any other fiction in the future, in near future at all? Or is that
The
some
issue I've run into is that I put a lot of creativity into my nonfiction. I put a lot of
yeah.
creativity into the emails that I write to the community, and the things that I share in my show and my
Right.
webinars. And so what needs to happen, if that is going to come back, is, and this goes back to kind of the one thing philosophy a little bit. If you say yes to one thing, you have to say no to something else.
Yes.
So I would need to decide what thing that currently depletes me creatively
Mm,
would I have to say no to. And
yeah.
that probably means me outsourcing something to my team,
Mm.
which is hard for me to let go of. Um, so those are the kind of things I would have to do to kind of get
Sure.
that back on. But I do miss it. And I think that some crazy marketing things I'm trying in 2022 and beyond might even inspire me to get back on the horse, but we'll have to see.
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome. That I love how you said too that like everything that you do with like your nonfiction and your classes and your emails, you put a lot of creativity into that. And I have noticed that. So like you really do a good job with your business and helping other people in a very creative way. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah. What do you love about helping other writers when it comes to making their book descriptions shine and also helping them sell on Amazon?
I love when we can really align what a reader is looking for with a author's story. I think that too often we see the same kind of things that crop up in blurbs, run-on sentences, which comes from trying to pack too much into the description. We come into thinking we see authors having plot as the number one driving force of their blurb, rather than having a
Mm,
character's emotional journey as the main part. And most readers do not care about the plot as much. They care about what happens to the characters. And that's not
right.
100% across the board, but it's frequent. And so those things, plus just general, like formatted poorly,
Oh,
no
sure.
real cliffhanger, those sorts of things. When we can know the genre after having written 4,000 of these,
Wow. Yeah.
and we can help an author who might have no idea how to make this sound like something that fantasy readers or nonfiction self-help readers or whatever genre readers, what they're expecting and what
Mhm.
they want to see, if we can help reformat that and rewrite that so that people who are looking for a book like yours find it and actually say, wow, that is what I wanted. And so be able to click that buy button. It's a really incredible feeling, especially knowing that, let's say, only 1 out of 20 people buy your book right now. If changes can be made that make it 1 out of every 10, you think about that over a 5-10 year period for all marketing and advertising you do. And it's like, it can make a huge impact, even though in the moment it can feel like a really small change.
I know you did mention some of these when you were mentioning, but like a little bit before. But what are the biggest mistakes you've seen authors make in their book descriptions? And are there easy fixes that they could, to implementing those changes? Or
I'll start with the easy fixes first. I think that authors should write a book description early enough in their process that they could share it with their editor.
okay,
Because I think the editor is going to say, oh, that's a run-on. Oh, that doesn't make sense. Oh, this kind of just ends. It's not that exciting. They would be able to point out some of the errors that we would point out at Best Page Forward. And so write it early in the process. We've even talked about the idea of blurbing to market, which is to write the book description first, share it with people who read in that genre or who write in that genre, and they could tell you, that isn't something that usually happens in paranormal romance, or that that character that you mentioned in paragraph 2, you should really combine that character with this character in paragraph 1, because that's going to fit the genre better. If you do it earlier in the process before you even write the book, then your chances of getting the book to be fitting what readers are expecting is
much better, probably.
Much likely. Yeah, much more likely.
That's cool.
Going back to the mistakes, I think a lot of times it is the run-ons. A lot of times it is the just kind of petering out, no real cliffhanger. There are formatting issues, but I'll say the number one issue I think authors run into is that you need some kind of hook, tagline right at the top of your book description before anything else that will get readers from your genre to really know, oh, this is this genre. Here are the stakes. Here's what happens if the main character doesn't get what they want. This is a big deal, right from like a line or 2 lines, because readers are fickle. They are going to potentially click away before they even finish your book description. So you have to get them really in early, and it's called a hook because you are literally trying to hook your reader like a fish and reel them into actually buying your book.
Perfect. Yeah. That's awesome. So when it comes to kind of getting that hook in there, is it best to like have like a couple words like describing what the story's about, or having concise like sentences, like a couple sentences describing, like you were saying, the stakes and stuff like that?
I've seen people do the single word thing. I've seen that. I think that it's a little better to have the short, concise sentences. Usually in fiction, we do what the main character wants, what is in their way, and what are the consequences of them not getting what they want. In romance, that would involve 2 characters, and the consequences are they might not fall in love. Or their love might not happen. In almost any other genre fiction, it's the world is going to blow up or they're going to die. Fantasy, sci-fi, thriller, all of them. And then in more literary fiction or women's fiction, it's about it's about enlightenment. It's about them feeling something in their soul. It's about it stirring something within them. And so those consequences are extremely important to have in there, or readers don't really know and that don't really get a feel for what kind of book this actually is.
So is there a certain time in like an author's career that they should look into doing Amazon ads versus maybe not doing it? Like, for instance, if they only have like 2 or 3 books out versus waiting until they have more books, what would you recommend?
This is a tough one because I think that for profitability,
Yep.
the best thing is to probably wait for a couple of books in a series, 2 or 3,
Mhm.
because if people pick up the whole series, you get paid more than you would
Mm.
if you just had one book out. But at the same time, I know we're trying to make a little bit of money here. We're trying to get $5, $10, $25 into our account each month. And if you don't market the book, that's going to be extremely hard to do. I
Sure.
would say that even early on, it might make sense to advertise a book one in a series or a standalone to see if it is profitable, because you don't really know. Most people, you have a book out there, you don't really know if the cover's any good. You don't really know, like, you think it's good, but do readers think it's good? One of the nice litmus test for that is running an ad or a series of ads, getting about 100 clicks for that book. So it could be 20 clicks in one ad, 20 clicks in another over the course of a couple months, and eventually all adding up to 100 of clicks just going to that book. And then
Yep.
you see how many people bought it, how many people read it cover to cover in Kindle Unlimited. Let's say it was 5 people read it, or 5 people bought it, 5 people worth of KU reads happened. 5 plus 5 is 10. Divided by those, with those 100 clicks in there, 100 divided by 10 means it takes about 10 clicks for someone to buy the book.
Wow.
And usually a lot of books are more than that. And you need it to be lower. You need it to be in the 6 to 8 range, 6 to 8 clicks for a sale range in order to be profitable.
Mm.
And if yours is 15 or 20 or 25, usually it means cover, blurb, metadata. Those things are not quite
Mhm.
working in your favor.
Okay. That's really good information. You just had a very successful Kickstarter, and I know about it because I'm a part of it. I was like, oh gosh, this is awesome information.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
congrats on that, first of all.
Thanks.
And then what were some things that you learned from doing that Kickstarter, and also maybe some tips for doing a successful Kickstarter like that with your books?
Absolutely. So you have to remember, I had a $20,000 Kickstarter, but I have about 40,000 people on my email list.
Oh, yep.
So if you did that math, earned about 50 cents per subscriber.
Yep.
So if you have 100 people on your email list,
Yep.
and you were to do a Kickstarter, you might want to set it at something like $50, because you need a bigger audience to do a crowdfunding campaign. And those numbers aren't always going to quite work out exactly in that way, but it needs to be considered first and foremost.
Sure.
The second thing is find valuable information on this first. I got a lot of value out of talking to friends who have run successful Kickstarters. The other thing to keep in mind is that it needs to look pro. You're going to be showing this to people. We had some nice graphics made up for the different rewards. We really worked on our story. I wrote an initial write-up and got feedback from multiple people, and I'm like,
Cool.
copywriter guy over here, but I got feedback that helped me make it better, because I know even more so maybe that you cannot do these things in a vacuum.
Right.
You cannot be the only person who looks at them. You need to share them. And it's tough because sometimes they're going to tell you that's crap. And you need to make changes to it, but you just kind of have to soak that up, and you have to be willing to get some help from these people. And you've seen it as well as I have on author groups and whatnot. Sometimes people share something because they want people to tell them that it's good.
Right. Yeah.
And if people tell them that it isn't good, they get offended.
Yeah.
You need to, it's okay to be offended, but you need to keep it to yourself. And then you need to do the work based on what they said, because you can be offended all live long day, but that doesn't mean the content isn't constructive to help you do better.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good reminder. I've found like getting feedback has been so helpful and helped me just improve so much in certain areas. So that's such a good point.
Same.
So I always like to ask this question too when I interview people, but like, what is the most difficult thing about being a writer / working in this industry for you? What's the most difficult thing, would you say?
I think that you have to be very self-motivated,
Yeah.
like all the live long day. You have to find a system that works for you right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that system stops working, because it will, if you run into this situation where something that was working for you
Mm-hmm.
stops working in the publishing, marketing, writing, self-productivity side, you could complain.
Mm.
You could go on the internet and complain and say, woe is me about the way things used to be.
Yeah.
Or you put your energy into figuring out how to do it better, how to do it differently, how to start over fresh. I see way too many people get caught up in, but this tip used to work.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, is that you will need to adapt. You will need to adjust. There is no business plan
Sure.
in the world that will hold true from beginning to end. And most writers don't even have a business plan to begin with.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah.
you just need to be willing and able to change things as needed
Yeah.
for yourself and for your marketing and for your publishing, because it's not a straight line up.
Mm.
You're like, great, I made 100. Next month I'll make 150. Next month I'll make 200.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it'll dip back to zero,
Sure.
but it's always darkest just before the dawn. And
Yep.
sometimes that zero can eventually go up,
Right.
but not if you complain all day and beat yourself up.
Right. That's a really good point. And I'm glad that you mentioned the having like a business plan and everything. That's a really good idea. Where would you recommend writers go? And are there any good resources out there for building their business plan when it comes to that?
One thing I will recommend, because I've had the book on my mind, is this book, Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt. And he's an author and runs a publishing company himself.
Yeah.
And this is not necessarily a business plan book, but it is a goal setting book. And a business plan is really just a detailed expression of when you want to achieve certain goals based on assumptions. And so your best year ever is helpful for that, for setting those goals and setting things that you want to achieve. Now, I've never been much of a business plan guy. I have definitely tried to write a business plan, couldn't tell you for the life of me what books or websites I used for it, but I will tell you that the business plan was useless within a month, because nothing played out the way that I thought it would. And so I would say that you should set some goals, but you need to get away from the idea that you're going to know exactly how to reach them. You might have an idea, but it's probably going to go very differently.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good reminder, because things like to go different, don't they?
Yes,
you aim for one thing and then it becomes pear-shaped.
It's true.
Yeah. Okay. So since we covered the things that can be a little more hard and more difficult, what about the most precious thing in this industry as being a writer and working in your industry? What is something that you absolutely love about it, that makes you excited about it?
I mean, I really love, I'm on the teaching side, of course. I really love when I see someone get it.
Yeah.
Like they start asking the right questions. They start being like, oh, so you're saying A plus B equals C. And it's like, yes, you understand. I'm so glad. And of course, sometimes there's slip back. So they're like, wait, so it's B plus D equals C, right? I'm like, no, still A plus B. It's still how it was before. But
Yep.
when they get it, when you see that look in their eyes, when they're like, oh, well, that means if I do this for the next few months, I'm probably going to be more successful, right? Yes. And if you stop doing this, then it'll be even better. It's like, oh, yeah. And so, like, this is one of the things, like, I've done some coaching. Now I have people on my ad school team, the ad squad, that do some coaching. And it's all about getting people to those aha realizations. And that, I think, is my favorite thing, is when I see, and it's not always like a huge success story. It's like they figured something out that will lead to more success in 3 to 6 months.
Right.
And those are the things I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that's great. Because I mean, that'll make a huge difference in their life. So what a cool thing. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. And like, where can people find you, Bryan? And where can they find you, your books and your courses?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, totally.
And so we do have a weekly podcast, the Sell More Book Show, that I do with Claire Taylor. And you can definitely find that, sellmorebookshow.com, and on all the podcast places. We might even get to YouTube at some point.
Cool.
We have our free quarterly challenges for Amazon advertising. That's at authorsadvertise.com. And then if you are interested in having a team of professional copywriters take the book description off of your plate, you can go to bestpageforward.net/blurbs, and we will write it for you.
Wonderful. I will share all of that in the book description. The book description, haha, the description below the video so people can find you and all of those awesome, awesome things. So yay. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. This was lovely.
Thank you. And
yeah,
I hope that y'all watching this find this helpful. And thank you again for having me.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All
See you
right.
later. Bye.
Bye.